I actually just exited a business slightly, Charley. So not massive, not glorious, nothing to write up in the papers, but we thought it was a good enough story just to walk through here. So I'm going to hand you the mic and you can get started on this one.
Well, I like to think of myself as a member of the community, and if I have questions, they should get answered on this show as well. And a few things I wanted to kind of I suppose, bring context to here is on this podcast particularly, we've been notable for talking a lot about investment assets of thinking like property shares and crypto in general. And I know there's others and there's classes and all the rest, but I think we forget that buying and selling businesses or building and selling businesses is often something done with great success as well. There's people that have done extremely well out of treating business as an asset class, not just a thing that creates cash flow or the ability to build wealth. Now, in your example, Grant, what I really enjoy about some of the things that have been different between us is, for me, I've been all about making cash flow in business and buying, in my case, property assets. In your case, though, you had a very different path where you made the decision, I'm going to assume in your late 20s or mid 20s, where you were going to actually invest in businesses and build businesses to sell. And you've just made an exit on one, and I think it'd be really cool to discuss it because it may open people's minds to potentially selling the business they got or building a business to sell. That might be their vehicle versus something more similar to mine.
Or even looking at what other investment opportunities, to your point, around businesses could be an investment opportunity. Do they sound as good as they actually are?
Completely. So let's kick this one off. What was the business and why did you get into this business?
All right. So many years ago, when I was living in the Philippines, I flew back, and two good friends at the time said, we just signed a lease on a premise and hey, we think we can do something with this, which is kind of like finding the solution, looking for the problem. And so they said, great, good business. Do you want to jump in on this business? So after quite a bit of deliberation, and this was pre sort of pandemic times and all those kind of things, there's so much co-working spaces in Melbourne, the growth was 361%. And so we moved to more of a virtual address, virtual office, kind of serviced office approach. So that's what we kind of started with. I'm going to jump in on that. Can you explain the business model of that as well? Yeah, so it was a smaller footprint. So it was about 150 square meters. So we predominantly built meeting rooms with a couple of dedicated offices. And so what it would be is you would pay your $50 to $100 a month to have an address with us, to have a phone number that just gets directed to your mobile phone. But then whenever you wanted to meet a client, you could walk into the premise and then you can actually say this is my office, because we've got no branding anywhere. It's completely white label. So anyone can pretend it's theirs. So you would have a suite 10 of the address. And then within that suite 10, you'd be hey, this is my office and this is where I work out of and all that kind of stuff. So it was more of a, how do you sell something multiple times without needing to have the inventory all the time? It's like a gym membership, right? If everybody who has a gym membership goes to the gym at the same time, the gym can't support it. And it was the same here. So it was great. We believe that a very few amount of people will use a meeting room within a given day. And so we can sell hundreds of these things, if not thousands, and then just support the people who want to meet people face-to-face, etc., and just do it from there. And then there's just hundreds of little mailboxes that kind of hidden behind different doors and stuff like that people can go in. And it's also accessible 24/7, which was a very big sort of advantage where a lot of the other competitors were only available between 8 and 6. So
for example, if you're a mortgage broker, maybe working mostly from home, but every now and then you've got to meet up with a client, this is where you could meet with that client or lead. And then also you could have your mail sent from there or things like that, so it looks a little bit more professional.
Exactly. So funnily enough, finance industry was a really big one, as well as digital services. So people selling SEO, paid ads and stuff like that, they'd come in, sell somebody. So it was usually the ideal target market was anybody who had a recurring product for a couple of $1,000s, where if they were to come in and use the facility, it would kind of pay for itself. So you might get a meeting room for $50, $100 an hour or $150 an hour, and you'd sell someone, and through that, it just makes economical sense.
All right. So we understand the business model now. How long were you in on this business?
Now, that's a very good question. So I reckon it would have been 5 years, give or take. So you can imagine getting the keys, and then transparency, it was about $250,000 fit out. So it was trust me, I don't want to do fit outs of offices ever again. And then after that, so then we started off sort of selling a whole heap of stuff, but it would have been about 5 years, noting that there was a period in the middle where we sort of ran it for a couple of years and there was a trio. Two of us kind of stepped away and there was like one guy that kind of ran it. And then he reached back out to me and said, hey, can you just help me sort of rebuild this business model, bring in some more accounts? And I did that. And they said, hey, look, I think that you need to sort of run this thing yourself and sort of go your own. And so that's where we kind of ended in that last exit.
So 5 years in, 250 grand in fit out and initial costs. How did the business actually perform in that time? Did it produce a good cash flow for you? Was this something that got, I imagine, reasonably affected by pandemic and the rest of it? Like, how did it all play out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the start, it was a good initial upkeep. It was a good uptick. However, as you can imagine, 3 different people sort of trying to run one business, differing creative inputs and differing sort of business experience, different business inputs. I'm not saying that one was better than another. What actually happened was because of the pandemic, the pressure for us to generate money actually created the pressure to build other products to go and sell to existing client bases. So instead of us just saying, hey, we just do like virtual addresses, virtual offices, and that's what we're known for, we actually ended up opening up sort of to doing a whole heap of other services. So we'd look for digital marketing companies that we can resell. We'd look for like reselling printing products like business cards, posters, and promotional material, and just like anything that we could potentially sell to the existing customer base, we did, which means that we kind of struggled with building a repeatable process. Word of mouth wasn't really there because no one really knew what we did. If you talk to one person like, they do business cards. You talk to someone else and like, oh yeah, no, they do virtual addresses. And so the challenge was in order for us to continue sort of paying through the pandemic and continuing on, it was this view of, okay, well, what are we actually going to do in order to sort of build that? And that was the time that I actually transitioned out of 3 people sort of owning it into 1 person owning it. And that was just below sort of really sort of key profitability. And then I sort of came back in a little bit later. We just refined it down to having 1 product set of 3 different packages. And then it became greatly profitable and actually a really good solid business for the guy who runs it now, which was awesome. Like it was the greatest example of when you have a single focus and you have 1 product that everybody knows you for, like your business can actually thrive. Like when you're known for too much stuff and you can't scale around it, like no one sort of grows off it. But yeah, just that 1 focus was kind of the key that unlocked a lot of other stuff.
How interesting. So did it produce like monthly cash flow for you? Was it bleeding cash from you?
Yeah, good question. So at the start, it was kind of profitable near the start, and then through or just leading up to the pandemic, as we sort of had that mistaken identity, we were putting in money. So I was like, each month we'll put in, it might be like $1,000 each or $500 each or anything like that. And that was just split based on percentage of ownership. And then that was kind of led us to that conversation of saying, okay, well, there was a trio. There's one guy who just said, hey, I want to take this on. And we said, okay, well, we'll almost write off the bad debt. You can take it and sort of run with it. And then after that, it was like, hey, like this thing looks like it might actually be a hit because obviously everyone in the pandemic was closing their leases and they say, hey, we want a virtual address and it's affordable and things like that. He's like, I just need some help marketing this and hitting it. And so then it became profitable. Now, when it became profitable, because there was so much debt on the business, there was no like personal debt, I'll say, so it's not like credit card debt or bank loans or anything like that. That was getting paid out as opposed to like dividends to sort of the owners. And the one who was sort of in the business operating it at the time was taking a salary and doing all that kind of stuff themselves. So I'm just like, I just won't get paid. That's fine because of sort of the later on, which is obviously the exit.
What about time commitment on these? Because often we think about like, you know, how active you've got to be in an investment to generate a return. If you had to like estimate it, noting it might have come in different stages, is this something you're putting an hour a month into, 10 hours a month, 100 hours? Like what did it shape up as? Yeah,
so at the start, it was a lot more effort. So call it a day a week. So maybe 8 hours, 10 hours a week of like actively in the business. I was more working on sort of sales and marketing as opposed to like sorting mail or letting people in and doing all that kind of stuff. Then I got out, obviously I did nothing. But then when I came back in, it was more about the strategy piece and putting the right people in the right seats. And so call it I don't know, I reckon when I sort of got back in, it might have been half a day to a day a week with peaks and troughs. So like one week it'd be really busy and another week wouldn't be so busy because you're reacting to sort of what's happening. So call it, on average, maybe just call it a day a week after, like before and after for each one. And again, I wasn't getting paid during that period.
Oh, and then the big question, did you make a profit on the exit?
Yeah, so if you ignore the time that I spent, slightly, right? But if you factor in inflation, I probably didn't make much at all. So I put in, it would have been about, because I was a very small sort of equity partner at the start, right? So it was more me for network and sort of marketing and stuff like that. So I put in, it would have been about 25, 30K at the start. Then a couple of chunks of like $1,000 here, $1,000 there, etc. So it might have been, I haven't done the maths on it, but call it maybe 40 grand, give or take in total. And I exited, I think it was just over about 50. And that was just paid out over a long period of time.
So we got a slight profit from capital if we don't include your time.
Just don't include the time. Don't include the time. And you got a slight improvement on capital.
I like to think from every investment, whether it goes well or doesn't go well, that I learn something from it, that it shapes me to be better in the future. So I'd love to get your perspective on it, like almost a few things here and tie them in is like, what did you learn from this experience? What was it like working with friends? And is this something you're going to potentially do again? Like how did it all come through for you?
Yeah, interesting question. So I'll tackle the friend one. So the best thing about it is that we're all still mates, which is awesome. So there's a lot of people who get into business together. And on the other side, like they kind of lose their friendship, if you'll say.
Oh, it's the fastest way to destroy a friendship.
And so like we're all like really good mates, like great mates even. So we catch up, we know each other's children. Well, I don't have kids yet, but they all know each other, and like we go out for dinner and all those kind of things. So it's awesome. The challenging component was that imagine 3 business owners, because everyone had run businesses before, where all of the different businesses were completely different niches, from like manufacturing to like digital marketing to all of these things, right? So we all had a view around how businesses operated.
We've all got these biases, right? It's like what's worked for us in our own world then shapes up what we want to do in the next one. I must admit I do the same thing, and I'm pretty sure you do as well.
Of course I do, because I know that I'm really, really, really good at a couple of things, and other things I'm like, you know what, someone else can take ownership. And the challenge that we had was every time that we were trying to define an overarching strategy, everyone had an opinion, but there was no sort of clear owner around, okay, someone owns this, someone owns that, someone owns that, someone owns that. And so when I stepped in to help out with sort of the marketing side, sort of on, I'll call it like the second innings. So during the second innings, from that marketing side, it was more just a key of going, okay, well, this is what I'm focusing on. Everything else is not mine. Like this is it. You can't second question me on this. You have to have a defined set of products. If you sell anything else outside of that, it's on you, it's not on me. But this is it, which meant that that's actually sort of part of the key as to why I think it actually did quite well progressing forwards, because it was like a very defined role where sort of for the first couple of years it wasn't. It was everyone
Can I just ask one more thing on that as well?
Of course.
Was this anyone's full-time business, or was it like a side hustle for everyone?
It was almost a side hustle for everybody. Yeah, so everybody still had their.
Do you think that was a factor?
Of course it was, 100%. But then it was interesting because everyone would try and make more money from their other main businesses to funnel back in. Because it was like, okay, well, is the pain good enough, or is there enough pain for us to really sort of step into this business and smash it full time and do all of these things? Or is it just easier for us to make more money in other businesses to go and funnel in? To which it was. And that was the key sort of challenge. But it was also why there was such a graceful sort of exit for everybody, because it was like hey, like you got other businesses which is crushing it. You've all got other businesses that are crushing it. The one guy wanted to continue it, to use it as his own office, but also have some other people in his network that he does JVs with, etc. So for him, it was strategically aligned to what he wanted. And so it was a very fortunate position as to where it sort of landed in.
Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into being a full stack business owner, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.